Okay, so here we are. We're going to bake brioche today. And brioche is a very enriched dough. You can see that I've got flour and salt and yeast and sugar all in the bowl, adding some milk and some eggs to that. And we're just going to hand mix the mixture together. What you can see on the right is all the butter that's going to go into this dough. The way brioche is made, along with other types of enriched doughs, is that you have to get the dough together first, build some gluten, get the gluten started so it has a head start, because we're going to be adding, in this case, 226 grams of butter to this mixture. Now, that is about 60% of the weight of the flour. So it's a lot of butter. But that makes for a very rich dough and a really good dough. This dough is great for making hamburger buns, it's great for making dinner rolls, and is traditionally used for breakfast rolls. So I've got this video sped up a little bit so that we can go through the kneading process of getting the dough together initially. It's a fairly stiff dough initially, but the butter is going to make it much more supple. We have to think of the butter in this recipe as being part of the liquids. So as they're added, the dough is going to get a lot softer, a lot more sticky, and a lot more supple. It's going to take a bit of work to get all that butter worked in, but we're going to blitz in the butter toward the second half of the kneading process. So I'm actually turning it out onto the board now, kneading it until it gets relatively smooth and becomes a cohesive mass. And as you can see, this dough is fairly stiff. The only thing softening it up at this point is the egg yolks and a little bit of fat that's in the milk. There we go. So now it's time to add the first addition of butter. The butter is soft, room temperature. So I'm going to kind of press it into the dough, just kind of press it in with my fingertips and fold it over, and fold it over again, and fold it over again, getting it thoroughly incorporated into the dough. The dough doesn't really want to absorb all this butter at first, but with enough persistence, we can get it to absorb all that butter. So I'll turn it out onto the board a little bit, but initially it starts sticking right away. The minute the butter gets incorporated, the dough becomes very sticky. So back to the bowl. I'm going to put the second addition of butter in. Now this second addition of butter is just going to make it even more sticky and more supple. So again, folding it on over, pressing it on in, getting that butter incorporated into the dough. I'm not going to lie to you here. This is going to take a little while to get all this together and to get the dough finally kneaded to a point where it's smooth and supple and we have some good gluten development. It's going to take some work. So while we're working on this, and we continue scraping the bowl down, continue bringing the dough together, just keep working at it. It's going to take a fair amount of arm strength to get this completely mixed in. But it will come together. As you can see, it's starting to come together now. Third addition of butter goes in. I'm just adding butter as soon as I see the last addition of butter get completely incorporated into the dough. So we'll be back in a minute. I'm going to keep on kneading here, and I'll probably go for another 10 minutes, and I'll bring us back to the next segment. Okay, so we're back. And you can see I've got all the butter incorporated now, and I'm going to do a little slap and fold. It's not sticking to the board quite as badly as it was, and that's partly because of all the butter that's in that dough. It's making it a little bit less sticky to the board. That doesn't mean this dough isn't sticky. This dough is very supple and very loose because of all that butter. But just keep working at it, slapping, folding it over, incorporating air into the dough, stretching it. That gives it strength and helps build the gluten. So as we go, just keep at it, be persistent. going to stretch that dough in the bowl. Now in the next segment, as we fade into the next video, you're going to see we're going to use a different type of technique. And it's basically called the plunging arm technique, where we go underneath the dough. So I clean my hands, and I go underneath the dough, and I give it a good pull up from underneath. And just keep pulling up. Go underneath, pull up. Go underneath and pull up. And what you're going to notice is that the surface of the dough starts getting very smooth. And that is just the result of gluten formation. The strands of protein that are in the dough have been hydrated, and they are starting to find each other through the process of agitation and kneading. And because of that, they're starting to form strong networks of gluten, despite all the butter that's in there. As we know, butter is a shortening agent, and it will try to shorten gluten strands. But if we keep at it, we can get enough gluten development together to make this dough hold together and make the bread very light and very soft when it's baked. The butter is going to help contribute to that softness, but the gluten is what's going to hold all the gases inside the dough and make for a very nice supple dough. So just keep at it with that plunging arm technique. There are mixers out there that are meant for this sort of technique. They don't use a spiral dough hook. Instead, they use plunging arms that go down into the dough and pull up. And these mixers are still made. They're much more common about a century ago, but they are very effective for making bread. So we're just mimicking that kind of behavior that type of mixer is doing. So I'm going back to the plunging arm technique here, pulling up, going back underneath and pulling up. And if you take a close look at the surface of that dough, the top surface of the dough is getting very smooth. And that's telling me that my dough is getting more developed. So I'm getting near the end of the kneading process now. What we're going to be doing in the next segment is we're going to be taking this dough out of the bowl. We're going to wrap it up in parchment paper. You can also wrap it in plastic wrap. And we're going to refrigerate it overnight. This dough will rest and develop overnight. The yeast will have a chance to do what it does. And the dough will be ready to shape tomorrow. Plus, with all the cold in the refrigerator, the butter will harden up and the dough will be much more easy to work with than it will be at this state where it's very, very soft. We would never be able to make much of anything out of this dough in its current state. We really need to chill it. So just gathering the dough together here to help it form a nice cohesive ball. And we will continue here in just a few minutes. You can see as I stretch it, we're getting some pretty good gluten development. So I'm going to go get some parchment paper and we're going to wrap this up. Okay, so here we're back. I'm going to go ahead and pull this dough out of the bowl, scrape the bowl down really well, and place it on half a sheet of parchment paper. We're just going to kind of gently spread it out and wrap it over and get it well wrapped so that it doesn't dry out overnight. And off to the refrigerator we go.